Hello, hello, hello. Happy Wednesday. My name is Shannon Stott, and we have a lot of W's today. It is Wednesday, and you are here talking about wisdom, wellness, and wealth with the Pieces Collective. I am your host, and I am so happy to have you and to have you here because we've got amazing people that are going to discuss yoga today and why it is important. Yoga in the Black community, healing practices, and principles. I'm wondering who is in the chat, who is out there, where you are seeing us from, where you're coming from. How does yoga impact your life? And any of that, put it in the chat. Get your fingers warmed up because you're going to want to talk to these people and join in this discussion. But before we bring up the amazing people that we have today, I want to introduce Sister Ikrama Mohammed, who I had the distinct pleasure of meeting a few weeks back. And it was so lovely to be in the same space with you, Ikrama.
It was wonderful. We have to do it again.
Yes, I'm down. I'm ready. But until then, take us away.
All righty. Greetings, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in tonight for what I believe is a critical conversation for the time. At the heart of the Pieces Collective is community. We're committed to building strong and thriving communities and working collectively with individuals and organizations whose intention is the same. These are serious times, and it takes a village is a thing. Community has always been how we have survived the worst of times, passed on wisdom, gained understanding, healed wounds, and inspired others to continue the journey. It has been how we keep our duty to our ancestors, sharing and analyzing their experiences and giving them honor, and learning what to do and what not to do. Even on the slave ships, we created communities that had to adapt beyond our differences, beyond our individual desires and personal pain, to learn how to communicate and bond based on a common and current condition. One that must have been terrifying and seemed impossible to escape. One that required an inner voice that produced a tremendous amount of courage, patience, perseverance, and most of all, faith. Today, we appear to be divided, challenged, fearful, and disconnected from that collective inner voice, more aligned with the individualistic and materialistic ways that tend to distract us from who we really are and from knowing what freedom really is. Much of what we have lost over the centuries of oppression, and I think that bears repeating, the centuries of oppression, holds the key to humanity and the answer to the question, what it means to be human. So we should seek out that inner voice to help us connect. I read a quote that said, the first step towards hearing the voice from within is to know that there is such a voice. Everything we need is already within us. I found that yoga is one of the traditions that helps us access and understand that. Our family has lost an elder a couple of days ago, my Aunt Linda. I was her first niece, and she took me everywhere she went, as aunties often do. She was a joyful soul, and I think I've only seen her angry once in 89 years, in spite of the fact that I know she had many challenges in life. Several months ago, we lost another aunt, Doris Ann Bailey, and it was at that time that I realized that we, my generation, are now the elders. I reflected on my grandmothers, Alberta Vance and Frances Robinson, and my great aunts, the strength and character of those women. These are the sisters that made sure no one in the neighborhood went without. They made gardens to make sure everybody had food on the table. They clothed people who didn't have clothes. They were there to correct you if you stepped out of line. These are the women who held together the community to the best of their abilities. It was important to them, and they made it a priority. We are losing that generation, and now the baton is being passed. Will it be our priority? I'm glad you are here tonight because I know these wise and committed sisters on the panel will be dropping some gems, as they say, that can help us and lead us further in the journey to reclaim our community. I hope you learn and are inspired by their words. I will miss my Aunt Linda, and I am saddened by her loss, but I celebrate her life. I know she completed her journey and did her best, and I will do mine. I understand the assignment. So may Allah be pleased with her, and may she rest in peace and love. Peace.
Thank you so much, Sister Akrama. We have some amazing panelists for you this evening, people who are going to inspire you and educate you and really, hopefully, answer some questions about what it means to be in a yoga community and what it means to do yoga. We have Charlene Marie Muhammad, who is a wellness practitioner practicing yoga for over 30 years. Charlene holds a Master of Science degree in herbal medicine from Maryland University of Integrative Health, MUIH, and is a licensed dietitian and certified yoga therapist. She and Dr. Marilyn Peppers-Citizen, who you will also meet, are members of the Black Yoga Teachers Alliance Board of Directors. Charlene Muhammad, welcome.
Ashe, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's so good to see you.
Honored to be here.
We also have Dr. Marilyn Peppers-Citizen, who is a certified yoga therapist, national board certified health and wellness coach, and is faculty for the MUIH Masters of Science in Yoga Therapy program. Marilyn has more than 35 years of military and business leadership experience in various senior level capacities. She's a retired Air Force colonel and holds a PhD in public policy and a master's degrees in business and national resource strategy. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It really is an honor to be here.
So glad to have you. And we also have Jana Long, who is a transformational leader who brings her management skills as a former media professional. She has practiced and studied yoga for over 50 years and bears witness to the emergence of yoga in the mainstream. She is the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of BYTA. Welcome, Ms. Jana Long.
Hello, thank you. I'm really happy to be in this esteemed company this evening. So thank you very much.
It is really amazing to have all of you here and really to talk about yoga in a way that I've never talked about it before. We can jump right in, but before we do, the question on the table here, just to get our minds, your minds, and the people watching, I'd love to hear your favorite pose and why. And not necessarily the stretching, what it stretches, but what it invokes in your body. Anyone can answer that one.
I just like to sit. The sit.
Mm-hmm.
Comfortable. For me, it's a comfortable cross-legged position, sometimes called Sukhasana or easy pose. That is my favorite yoga posture.
My favorite is actually lying on my back on the floor. It's part of a practice called Yoga Nidra. So it's sort of like corpse pose, just laying still, but it allows me to really tap into the inner parts of myself.
And my favorite is what we call mountain pose or Tadasana. It's something that I go back to every day, making sure that I am standing upright to the creator. This is how I look at when I'm thinking about mountain pose. We take something called high salute, often in mountain pose, but it's a way to align myself with the alignment of the earth, the sky and the earth. So I would say it would be Tadasana, mountain pose.
I want to bring, while other people are in the chat thinking about their favorite poses, we're gonna bring in a video in a moment, but before that video, what I want to say is the three of you have just described sitting, laying down, and standing up. Just the three normal things that we do as humans. I knew this was going to be a great conversation. I didn't know how grounded it was going to be. Let's see this video and then we'll move in. This is amazing. This video is actually a trailer to a documentary that Jana Long is producing, is part of, and we're going to be learning about a lot of things through that documentary, a lot of history of yoga, a lot of powerful people who have done yoga and why. And when they return, we will talk to them about, oh, Jana, you're here, actually. We'll talk to you. Can we talk to you a little bit about that history?
Sure. That is a 33-minute documentary that is available for anyone to see on YouTube. It is a history of Blacks in yoga. The idea was to sort of look at, as yoga was introduced to the West, particularly the United States, how did it emerge into where Black people lived and began to practice it? The first yoga teacher from India to come to the United States was Vivekananda as part of the 1893 World's Fair. And then subsequently, about 20 years later, Paramhansa Yogananda, who really became popularized yoga. But I have to say that what our idea of yoga is today and what it was then are not the same thing. Those yoga masters that came and introduced yoga to the West were not doing yoga postures. You know, they were not moving their bodies around. They were lecturing about a system for personal development. That's what yoga essentially is. It is a system, an ancient system that is about self-development, insight into self, self-love, all the things that yoga, the benefits of yoga begin with the word self. And it had very little to do with the athleticism that we see now of how people practice yoga. So I just wanted to use that documentary to introduce folks to, how yoga came to Black people in America through the trajectory, and again, not looking like it looks now. And so there's a lot of content and information there. I think it's quite entertaining and informative. So I would encourage anyone to go to the Uncommon Yogi and check it out.
We will. And let's take this and bring it back to what we had started talking about, which were these three poses that you all were talking about, which basically are the things that we do. We sit, we lay down, and we stand up. Yes. And as you're talking, Jana, when you're talking about self-improvement, self-development, baseline, the question that comes up is, can you sit down? Can you stand up? Can you lay down properly, with peace, with joy, with insight? And I'd love to hear the three of you just talk about those foundational movements, those foundations of yoga, where they come from, what they do for us. I'm going to just throw it to Charlene. Exactly.
Yeah, it'll be a race. Thank you, Shannon, for asking that particular question. And what comes to mind for me is that, particularly as Black people and enslaved Black people, these were three things that were really denied of us. We were denied the ability to rest. We were denied the ability to sit. So if we were sitting, we were considered being slothful and lazy. And even when we were standing in a way that was cowardice, in order to not call attention to ourselves. So with the practice of yoga in those, but it's interesting that we chose those three things and it was not rehearsed by any means. And yet what struck me that comes to mind is the freedom that, and if we're talking just about asana, which is the poses, the freedom that it gives your body to realign yourself in the natural way that the body is meant to be aligned on a physical level. So we'll just take it from that and we can go deeper. And so to take Sukhasana, which is easy seated pose, and for some yogis, that means in a cross-legged seated position, but not necessarily so. It is, what does it mean to take an easy seat? To be able to sit in a way that you are free to enjoy your connection with the earth. When you're lying, to actually be free enough to rest and renew. And most people, this is something we all suffer from. I know a lot of us don't know how to rest. We either pass out or we're, struggling to sleep. We're having a restless sleep, so to speak, or it's not restful. And there's a freedom that comes when you can reach that point that you can absolutely let yourself go without fear. Let your mind go in order to know that the universe is going to protect you so that you can rest. And then just to stand up in a way that you're commanding the beautiful space that you've been allowed to do. You have the freedom to stand tall. So I'm going to pass it, boom, to Marilyn.
Thank you. Thinking about I'll say the posture that I selected, and I even hesitate to say posture because I see it as a state. I see each one of the postures that we named as states. But as Charlene said, to be in a place where, if you think about lying in a place of rest, you need to be in a place of safety. You need to be fully connected with yourself. And it takes a lot to get there. And you have to be still. And if we think about being still means being with myself, and how for some people, just the thought of having to be alone with self and be alone with the thoughts that we have might not be accessible. So as Charlene mentioned, each one of those postures really is a state for an individual to be in at a particular time.
Yeah.
As someone, when you read my bio, Shannon, I have been practicing with an awareness of yoga for a very long time now. Before there were yoga mats, before there were yoga studios, before there were yoga clothes, before there was any yoga teacher trainings and retreats, none of that existed. Yoga was about the word that Ikrama used when we entered this room. It was about coming together in community, sharing, opening up with each other, contemplating. For me, as a young woman at that time, why am I here? What is my purpose? And just sort of talking with people who were of a similar mindset. Not everyone does that sort of deep self inquiry, but there are those who are seeking, who do and did at that time. And that's what it was about. It was about us coming together to talk, to share, to eat together, to listen to music together, to dance together, to do all of the things that bring people together in community where they feel safe with each other, where they feel seen by each other, where they can trust each other. And that was what yoga was about. I like to say yoga is life. Yoga is you setting an intention and then putting the intention into practice, the things that you do to realize that intention. And then hopefully the manifestation of that intention, and that intention is heartfelt and based on your higher aspirations for yourself. And you need support. You need the support of a community to help you achieve that. So that is my foundation in yoga. And again, nothing to do with whether I'm twisted up in some posture and all of that. It didn't have anything. I didn't know anything. I mean, there was a lady who did a TV show, but I was a young woman. I wasn't concerned about my body. I was lucky that I was born and have had good health. And as a young person, a strong body, fortunate in that way. That was the least of my concern, was not my body. I was concerned about my soul and my spirit. And that, I think, in essence, is what the journey of yoga reveals to us.
Can we, Charlene and Marilyn, follow in Jana's just example as far as giving us a little bit about your individual journeys to and through yoga from the beginning to now, from some part of the beginning to now?
Well, for myself, and I believe I shared this maybe at one point on wisdom, wellness, and wealth, and I'll say it again. I was introduced to the practice of yoga by my mom, and this was in the early 80s. And we weren't talking about stress at the time like we're talking about it now, yet her articulation to me of the way that I was acting was stressed. I was acting like I was stressed. My mother's a professional dancer who was also practicing yoga at a local, she and other dancers at a local yoga ashram in New York City. And she invited me to go there. So that was my introduction to yoga, integral yoga. And like Jana, I wasn't introduced to a physical practice of yoga. I was introduced to meditation and chanting. That was the practice that I was introduced to first at integral yoga. So it was chanting and sitting in meditation, and then you would have a physical practice of yoga so that you could sit longer periods of time. And so I fell in love with the practice, and I then moved out of New York City and moved to Seattle, Washington, and continued to study yoga there. I had a practice started my family, introduced my family, my sons to yoga. They called it yogurt. Let's practice yogurt, mom. You know, but the beautiful experiences of it is that, you know, all through my pregnancies, I was practicing yoga, and it was of benefit and value. And so that's how I got introduced to it. I can tell you a long story short, you know, I never thought I would be someone who would teach yoga necessarily. I went into a yoga teacher training to deepen my own practice of yoga. And then as the creator of habit, I fell in love with teaching. And as I came out to share my yoga practice, I began sharing the yoga practice with women like myself. So when you're in yoga teacher training, and particularly during that time, the yoga teacher trainings were taught and run by European women. And so my idea was that that was going to be the student that I taught. But fortunately, when I started sharing that I was teaching yoga, women my age was started going, could you teach me this thing? And so began teaching women like myself and sharing that practice. So that's sort of it in a nutshell. I'll pass it to Marilyn.
For me, my entrance to yoga was really quite different. I came to yoga at a much older age. I am originally from West Texas, the arid, dry, flat, wide open spaces of Texas. And there was no yoga there that I can remember. Didn't even see it on television. So it was just never something that was of interest to me or that I was even curious about. But having joined the military, traveled around, I did find my way to the East Coast. And it was in Virginia that I was first introduced to it by a friend. And I was well situated in my career at that time. And so being in the military is really difficult to plant roots in any one place. So I was moving every 2 to 3 years. But I was introduced to it through a physical practice. But as I learned more about it, for me, it was the knowledge. I wanted to better understand it. And I have thought about it, and what I have come to acknowledge and understand is that there were innate practices in my life that I was already doing to sustain me in difficult situations, difficult environments. And as I learned more about yoga, I saw there was a connection there. So it's like I didn't even know it. I knew that when I was in certain situations, that if I could control my breath, I could control how it reacted to certain situations. And then I learned, oh yeah, there are yoga practices, and those breathing practices are for that particular thing that you just did. So I have come to yoga from a different perspective, but I really appreciate that I had some practices, whether they were things that my parents and grandparents taught me, or things that I knew that I needed to do, that was a practice, a philosophy that would carry me through some very difficult situations. Mm-hmm. And it was yoga. I just didn't call it that, but that's what it was.
This is great. So Marilyn, what you're talking about is you're already doing something. You were already doing something to cope, as it were, or to help you through a situation. And then you found that thing that you were doing was called yoga, or at least you could practice yoga to enhance what you were doing. And I'm wondering, from the three of you, how else can we integrate yoga into the cultural practices of the Black community, things that we're already doing? How can yoga help us balance those things? How can we use yoga in our everyday?
I like to say that my grandmother was the best yoga teacher that I ever had. Mm-hmm. Black woman born in 1909 in Elkmont, Alabama, who probably didn't go beyond 6th grade. She could write her name, write a letter. But she was creative, she was resourceful, and all of those things came out of her, not out of uh, an indirect experience of reading and then interpreting what someone else has written into her life, but her direct experience of living, of working with plants, of cooking, of just sitting still. I remember one of the things I remember very vividly, and I would say I learned to meditate when I was 8. Back then, when there would be a thunderstorm in the summertime, everyone came in the house. You had to come in, the lights went off, if there, and no TV, no radio. And as that storm passed overhead, you sat still, you sat quiet. There wasn't no rabble rousing or any of that. And her way of expressing that, we were to be still while God did his work, was how she would put it. With no card games, no, nothing. You were sitting in silence and in stillness. And as an 8-year-old kid, that impacted me quite deeply. I just remember those times. And this was in Warner Robins, Georgia, where I would spend the summers. I was one of those kids that got sent south, where the family came from when school was out. And it would thunderstorm almost every day. But that time of sitting, and as that storm passed over and the room darkened because the dark clouds were over and those loud claps of thunder, but to sit and absorb that and to be quiet. And it's hard to do that now for many kids, just sitting still, but I learned how to sit still while the storm passed over. A powerful lesson in yoga.
Um, as we grow, and I think that every individual at some point in their life, they ask the question, why am I here? What is the purpose of my life? At some point. And hopefully that doesn't get extinguished from us, because it can. Or we find superficial ways to answer that question, particularly in a capitalistic society. And yet, that is really what yoga is about. It's pondering that question. What does it mean to be human? Why am I here? What is my purpose? From whence do I come? And that question is a universal question that's innate to all indigenous people on this planet. And we ask it in so many different ways. One of the joys that Marilyn and I had in writing this book was finding the congruency of our indigenous Black spiritual traditions and aligning that in contemporary times. Mm-hmm. And so I think Janice spoke to that. I remember my grandmother sort of having that same tradition of coming in or just telling us to be still. If we were bouncing around, there was a time where it was time to be still. I can recall sitting and snapping peas, when it was time to cook, everyone was there and it was just a quietness to it and an intentionality. And that is one, we can have a formal practice of meditation or stillness, and yet it is the intentionality, those life events, activities that cause us to tune in and focus. That's yoga.
It's difficult to hear, mm-hmm. Right? Because, and I'm wondering, mm-hmm. I'll pose this question and we can go back and forth and whatnot. But Jana, you said it before there were yoga clothes, before there were yoga mats, right? It's so easy to get wrapped up in the capitalistic version of what yoga culture looks like. So I'm wondering if you can talk about what yoga actually is versus what it is being sold as.
I am, once I began to study yoga, the philosophy of yoga, um, in its definition as codified by Patanjali, who is credited with writing the Yoga Sutras, these little threads of meaning of what yoga is. The very second one, Yogas Chittavriti Narodaha. Yoga is stilling the fluctuations of the mind. Yoga is stilling all of that mental movement that's going on while you sleep, because you dream, while you remember, while you project forward, while you can't be present with right now without thinking about what you're going to do, got to do, had, used to do, and all of that. To be able to self observe, to be able to turn your lens into what's moving across your own mental landscape. That's what yoga is. And then there's a physical component. The physical part of it, I think, is important but for me, it never has been the central focus of the practice. But if it is for other people, especially now, things change and morph into new forms, and that's how I see yoga. It's a new form, so people will enter into the practice based on where it is when they learn about it. Where it was when I learned about it didn't have anything to do with those things. And it has the way I learned to practice yoga. I think I did not, because there were no yoga classes everywhere. Every now and again, there might be a yoga or someone who really came together. We would sit around and have what we used to call hoot nannies. That's when people come together. They call it sangha now, and kirtan and all that. We would come together, and back then, because I'm old, y'all. Back then, Bob Dylan was singing Blowing in the Wind. It was all of these protest and freedom songs. And we would get together and sing those. And it'd be some hippie dude with long hair strumming a guitar, maybe at a non denominational church. And on occasion, a yoga teacher would come through what was at that time the YWCA. There was Young Women's CA, not just for men, but those were far and few in between. When I actually saw someone doing yoga postures, there was a teacher who had a PBS show in the early 70s. And what I saw her doing, which intrigued me, what I think it was Marilyn, how we were moving. It was something, I saw somebody doing something that I already didn't know it was called yoga. I just like to do what is called shoulder stand. It was something I learned in gym class. We did the bicycle and we used to hoist our legs up and pump the legs up and down like you riding a bike. Oh, I see this yoga teacher on PBS hoisting up. And I'm like, hey, there's a lady doing that thing I like to do. Right. And that was the first time I knew that that thing I like to do to make my body feel good was called yoga. I was doing it. I always say yoga, we don't do yoga. Yoga does us. Yoga, if you practice yoga, it does you. That's the transformation. You don't do it. It's another way of looking at it.
Mhm.
Marilyn, I saw you come off mute. You had something. You got
I don't remember-
inspired.
I don't remember what it was now, but fluctuations of the mind. There we go. To a point that Jana made too, we find our way to yoga when we're ready to be part of the practice. And so looking at it from my perspective, it's finding a balance between not feeling like I missed things because I didn't come to yoga when I was younger. I came to yoga much later. But what I really appreciate is that there is something innate in us as a people that we have these practices, and they are handed down to us, from our grandmothers and mothers and aunties, those aunties that take care of the whole neighborhood, as Akrama mentioned earlier. And it is being in a place where we can weather the storm, whether it's the thunderstorm or the thunderstorm of racism, the storm of discrimination, whatever storm it is that we're being faced with, being able to weather that storm. And over time, it does start to weather our bodies also, that we need these practices to survive. And, the fluctuations of the mind, we see things as we think they are, but they don't necessarily in reality be what we think we see, right? So it's being able to really connect with ourselves, and oh, by the way, really discovering who we are, who the self is, the capital S self. And that takes time. It takes time. I just wanted to add that.
I want to just give a little plug for the physical practice, because I definitely believe that the physical hatha yoga practice does have purpose. And in our Western culture, most people are living from the neck up. So we spend a lot of time here. We have no idea what's necessarily happening from the neck down. There's a complete disconnect, not only from the commercialized society that we live in, but also because of trauma. Okay, so then there's a fear about being in the body, really feeling what it feels like to be in your body. And the physical yoga practice can ease that, can heal that, can help us to become rooted again in being inside of our bodies. I remember teaching a class once, and I think we went into it was at the point after a hatha yoga practice or physical yoga practice where I was guiding the students into relaxation. And I had a student say to me, and this was a seasoned woman in her 50s or 60s, say to me after class, "This is the first time I heard or felt my heartbeat." So I've been on the planet for 50 years. I haven't felt my heartbeat. I haven't acknowledged that. So it does have its, yes, we're here, and it's, of course, because all this athleticism and youthfulness is a big part of this Western culture. And yet the one of the 8 limbs of Patanjali's yoga philosophy is asana, which is physical movement. And I believe that it is to help us connect with and be intentional about what it means to be in our bodies. So I just want to make a plug for physical practice.
Well, yes. And I appreciate the plug, because I would love for all of you to talk about really the role of yoga and in mental health. You're saying that you're talking about being disconnected from one's body. How does being connected to the body help with our mental health?
I just want to roll back a little piggyback on what Charlene just said, that may open up our understanding. There are different approaches to yoga. Hatha yoga, the philosophy of hatha yoga. See, you can do your body, but if you're not taking care of your body, what you eat, et cetera, there is a philosophy and an approach that's called hatha yoga that has to do with the physical body. There is an approach to yoga that is called bhakti yoga, which is devotional, prayerful, chanting. There is an approach to yoga that's called karma yoga, where you are in service to others and yourself. You're fulfilling a need. There's an approach to yoga called jnana yoga, which is for those who want to consume knowledge about the practice. So, just so we know that when we say the word yoga, it could be any of those things. You can practice yoga and not do anything physical. You can practice yoga and be like a monk, or where you live in a monastery. You may have some things that you do to, because the body needs movement, but you choose the approach to yoga when you understand it as a broader thing than what we get here in the West. There are many different ways to practice yoga that may resonate with who you are, be that physical, devotional, knowledge, service to others. So I just wanted to throw that out there to say that there's more than one way to practice yoga.
That's so helpful, because for people who are watching this, and for many people, when we hear yoga, we think either it's hot yoga, vinyasa yoga, and I think that's it. That's what people are thinking. And it is very helpful just to distinguish that there are very many more options out there outside of those 2 or 3 things that we have come to know as yoga.
And
We
I like
practice yoga in the West.
what was that?
I said we primarily practice a movement. And just one more thing I wanted to say, this is really old school, but that word asana that is codified as a limb in yoga doesn't have anything. There's only one posture. And that what Patanjali saw was people sitting. He didn't see people doing down dog and back bends and all that stuff. He saw them sitting and observing the phenomenon of nature around them, which then when the hatha yoga pradipika, this is when the yoga postures, and the earliest postures are named after things in nature, animals, trees. That's the observation, movement of the planets. So that's what they were doing. They were you can't observe if you're moving around. And if y'all caught up in your own head, you ain't gonna see nothing that's happening around you. So I just wanted to, that was a teaching I learned early on. It's up for debate, but that's what I learned asana meant, was to sit.
Other thoughts?
I wanted to add to that is that there's also a connection between the mind and the body. So even if you're moving, there is still the mind connection. Even if you're sitting and contemplating, there is still a body connection. So it's not that those 2 are separate, even though you have a different approach to yoga. It is all of it, mind and body.
Yes, it is one of the reasons why we're here to talk about that, is that the connection, and Charlene, this is what you were saying, the connection between mind and body can be so disparate that it's very difficult to feel the flow, to understand what the flow is. I think that people have an experience of knowledge or understanding of like what it is like to be in one's mind, and then what it is like to be in one's body. And we'll have conversations. I've heard conversations of people between people who, oh yeah, I needed a mental break. So, right. But they're doing something that to their bodies that's not actually giving them a mental break, or vice versa. Oh yeah, I needed to relax my body, so I watched Terminator 2. This is not going to help your body relax, right? We really have this disconnect. And for the Black community, is there a practice? Is there a practice that you would recommend while people are just stepping foot into yoga? And I ask for the Black community because we are Black women, and maybe we have needs that other communities don't. That's also a question.
I think the first thing that I would always offer our community is to find their breath. Mm-hmm. We haven't had the permission to breathe, really breathe. The breath is an amazing experience that's beyond the shallow breathing that most of us have. Most of us are breathing right here. It's shallow, it's quick, it's hypertensive. And that is because we have suffered from so much heartache and heartbreak as a people, past, present, and hopefully not future. So I think the best practice that we could share with one another is the breath. And I can recall being in, maybe we did this at the BITA conference, I can't remember, but just connecting, holding one another's hands and breathing together is an amazing experience. The connection to giving yourself permission to be touched in that way. Hold my hand, let me hold you. And then learning that deep, deep breath is probably the first practice that I would offer us as a community.
That is my first go-to as well. And I appreciate and like to let people know that there is tremendous power in our breath. Through breathing, we have the ability to calm ourselves down. We have the ability to bring ourselves up. We have the ability to stop this wash of hormones flowing through our bodies that help us have to deal with so many non-communicable diseases like cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, diabetes, and the list goes on and on. So the breath is powerful, and for an individual to know that through this thing, the body will breathe itself. It's not something that I have to direct, but that I can, and that I have control.
One of the practices I like to ask people to do, it's called samyama. And because yoga is about disrupting the idea that we're separated, that there's no separation. So I suggest, just go outside, touch a tree. And when you touch that tree, you say, I am that. Whatever, you pet your cat, I am that. You touch a piece of furniture, I am that. Because the same elements that comprise our known universe are you and that. Mm-hmm. So, and I think it's particularly important to do that with things in nature. When you touch the grass with your feet, I am that. You will learn to, if you respect yourself, you will learn to respect that which is a part of you, which is everything. Because there is no separation. The idea of separation in yoga, it's a delusion or an illusion that's called Maya. You think you're you, and I'm over here, and we ain't got nothing to do with each other, but we have a collective consciousness. That's why when you think something, oh, I got a great idea, that's your consciousness isn't in your mind. Your consciousness is outside of you. Consciousness is everywhere. So then you don't act on the idea, somebody else does it, and then you're like, oh my God, I thought about that. Yeah, well, because it's out there, it's collective. So recognizing that how we experience ourselves in this duality is an illusion, that it is the consciousness. And that's where yoga, it's hard. This is why we do hatha yoga, because trying to teach that kind of stuff to people is very difficult.
Well, on that note, then this is a question from Karen Freeman. How do we demystify yoga and address barriers of access in the Black community? Some find it spooky, right? And this is exactly what we're talking about when we start to see yogis talking about, okay, because we're all one, man. We're just one entity, right? And for the Black community, who we talked about, Charlene was talking about the ways in which we have been brought up to stand and protect ourselves, right? We are a community that is very aware of not coming across scary, being sure that we are protected, being sure that we are grounded in a certain way. And how do we do this? How do we demystify yoga, bring the Black community in, let them know that it's beneficial, and release this spooky feeling that Karen is talking about?
Well, Black people claim to be spiritual people. Is your spirit spooky to you?
Mm-hmm.
Is that spooky? We fill churches, and there's a religious component, but that is about spiritual nurturance. Getting the spirit of you. Does that scare you? Maybe you're already practicing that. It's just that you could expand your understanding of what you already know. It's not a mystery. You're born knowing this. This is innate. It's just that we start getting bombarded with all sorts of outside definitions that early on we don't know how not to embrace them. They come from our parents, our teachers, whoever. But the spirit of you experience every day, all day, for all of your life. Are you afraid of that? You should, every individual should ask him or herself or their self that question. Does that scare you? And why?
Charlene was definitely inspired. Did you have something to add?
It's all about love. And, one thing that I am very hopeful for, I strongly believe that at the root within the Black community is love. We may forget it. We may have different interpretations of it. However, when we need to come together, just as Janet was saying, the spirit of love is in us and it has to be reawakened. When things are spooky, it's usually out of fear, right? So we are afraid of anything that's outside of our sphere of understanding. So we're clinging to an interpretation or a thought or a belief system that maybe has saved us at one point or makes us feel safe. And so when there's other conversations, anything that makes us feel vulnerable, let's put it that way, can become spooky. I can't control what feels vulnerable. But again, when we have uh, made our appearance on this earth, come to birth, we are given one quest in life, and that is, why am I here? What is my purpose? How do I find myself, the self? That is the goal of our lives. And we can ignore it, or we can plateau and go, okay, I'm here, I figured it out, that's it, not moving any further. Or we can keep exploring it. And yoga is a path for us to continue on that journey of like, wow, what more can I learn about myself, the self creation? And I, it's all about love.
Marilyn, I see you smiling. Everyone's been smiling, by the way, this whole time. But
Well, for me, I go back to the way I found my way to yoga. It was realizing that I was already doing these things. So if we can help our community to understand that you already breathe, you already know some of these things. People, whoever raised you, probably taught you some things, like to not purposely hurt other people, or to be kind to other people, or to sit and think about things. All of that is yoga. So it's not foreign to us. We just haven't made the connection that it is part of this philosophy, this exploration of life.
So here's a question for you. Let's say that someone who's watching this at this point is like, okay, fine, I'm ready. I'm ready to jump in, but I'm not ready to be around that type of yoga. That type of yoga being, I'm going to get my mat and my cute top and my expensive water bottle and stand on my head. I don't want to do that yoga. I want to do Charlene's yoga. I want to do Marilyn's yoga. I want to do Jana's yoga. Where do I go to find either the three of you, or how do I find that the type of yoga that you all have been discussing this evening?
Well, I'm giving a plug to the Black Yoga Teachers Alliance, because there is a community of Black yoga teachers all over this country and all over the world who have embraced a practice of yoga. There are many Black yoga teachers now who are authors. They have videos, they're doing online classes. We really have a strong community of Black yoga practitioners that are sharing many aspects of yoga, many different aspects of yoga. And so I would absolutely recommend going to the Black Yoga Teachers Alliance website. We have a membership directory that if you're interested, wherever you're living, you can sort of research yoga teachers in your area or programs in your area. We have a Facebook page. So there's a cadre of us out there now. You can also start with this wonderful book,
That's
Yoga
it.
in the Black Community.
Written by Charlene Mohammed and Marilyn Peppers-Citizen.
As a primer to just start getting some ideas about how our traditions as indigenous people on this planet is congruent with a yoga practice. So they're fortunately, we're at a time where there are a lot of resources now
Mhm.
for people in the Black community, our community, to come together and to learn
Mhm.
about what yoga is all about from different perspectives.
Yeah. Charlene, and for everyone, we're about to wrap up, but this is the second time, Charlene and Marilyn, that you have brought up our history being congruent, our practices and traditions being congruent with yoga practices. Can you give us just a couple of things that you're talking about, that you've put in your book, that you're talking about in general? How is yoga congruent with the practices and traditions of the African American diaspora people?
Oh, I'll give a few, but I think each one of us could probably share. So when we think about Black people in our indigenous spiritual selves, we are prayerful people who have always sought out a connection with nature. We've always had a mind body connection, mind body spirit connection with the Creator by whatever name we used. And that is yoga. It is that mind body spirit connection. That's the congruency. And it comes, and there are many different ways that we express that beautiful connection with the Creator, our Creator, by whatever means that you call it. So that's one of the ways that we align, is we look at those traditional practices of indigenous enslaved Africans and how we connected with nature, be it through food, through plants, through our spiritual practices, through movement, and show how those are the same types of practices that you can find in a yoga practice.
Mm.
And I'm going to tip it to Marilyn.
Well, Charlene, you mentioned one of them, and I think about this sometimes when things get bad and you don't know who to call on. Like we innately turn to prayer. Like even those who say they don't pray, if things are in a situation where you need to do something, then you just automatically turn to prayer. You reach out and you connect to someone, somewhere, something. And so continuing that connection, I think, is one way that we can as well.
I agree with that. I would say African people on this planet, wherever they may live, and are the most embodied people on the planet. That's why we can dance. That's why when I watch YouTube, I watch videos, and even babies. Little kids are bouncing up and down to music. I saw a baby in the crib, like 6 months old, rocking to some music. So we are embodied people. Our creative expression has changed the world. Our dance, our style, our music. So we are practicing yoga. It doesn't look like it looks in the traditional, maybe Indian form that has been passed down. But for what yoga is defined as, and it must be of your spirit, we are practitioners of yoga. We just don't have it systematized. And that's what the philosophy that we're talking about. It's systematized. Now you can do this, you can do that. It's not willy-nilly. There is a system, a codification of practice. And then so it's the merging of that codification with who you naturally are. That's all. It's very accessible, and you were born with it. Like I said, little baby was, they had a video, baby was 6 months old. They put some baby was crying. Y'all can look at it. It's on Facebook. Mama put some music on. Next thing you know, the baby is boogieing on her stomach. She's smiling. Can't even walk.
So
Embodied.
we are.
Embodied.
And okay, I'm getting the signal, but before we go, we have the Black Yoga Teachers Association conference coming up.
Black Yoga Teachers
Alliance, excuse me. Thank you. And that is coming up. What can we give us some smatterings of what we can expect?
Oh my God, this thing is fire. Okay, let me just say that. And the focus is on, see, the conversation around mental health and emotional well-being. It's a big conversation in yoga right now. However, for BITA, that's our acronym, we've been talking about that since our inception in 2016. So our conference is looking at how yoga supports our mental health, our emotional well-being. And it's going to be expressed in so many different ways by the phenomenal presenters that will be at this conference, including these two people here, Marilyn Peppers-Citizen and Charlene Muhammad, talking about yoga in the Black community, healing practices and principles. There's a workshop called Decolonizing Mental Health. You ever heard about that? Hello? Decolonizing mental health. There's so much. And we're having a poetry slam and an open mic night, a book swap. I could go on, but I know y'all are running out of time. Go to the website. The schedule is up. You can see who's presenting, what they're going to do. Some of the best yoga teachers, not in the country, in the world, will be at this Black Yoga Teachers Alliance. Back together again, because we haven't been together in person since 2019.
Wow.
Look out.
Please, everyone, look out.
Look out.
Look out. As we are wrapping up, last things to say. If someone they fast forwarded, they came to this, they fast forwarded, they were just like, I just want to hear the highlights. What do you leave people with as yogis?
If they did that, I would tell them to slow down. Slow down.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to miss a lot of stuff doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Your breath is intention. Find your intention through your breath.
Connection.
Okay, friends, slow down. Your breath is intention, and connect. Also, stand up, lay down, sit down.
Yeah.
Yoga. Okay? Okay. We've had an amazing time. Thank you so very much for your insights and your way of supporting for us what yoga is and presenting a different way of thinking about yoga so that we can really lean in to who we are as Black people, as Black women, and not be afraid of the things that we're already doing. And I just really appreciate the time, Charlene. Thank you so much. Jana, thank you very much for your time. And Marilyn, thank you very much for your time. For those of you who have joined us live, thank you very much for your time. It's amazing to do these talks and these conversations, having them with the Pieces Collective. And this isn't the last one. We have lots of things happening. If you are excited about Pieces Collective and the Wisdom, Wellness, and Wealth events, we do have Shop Local is the name of the next event. Shop Local, Empowerment with Every Purchase. And that's Wednesday, August 21st, 2024. at 7 p.m. That's the next one of these. And if you are looking for the book, there's the Yoga in the Black, written by Charlene Marie Mohammed and Dr. Marilyn Peppers-Citizen, both of whom were with us today. Community book signing on August 4th, 2024 at 6 p.m. at Busboys and Poets in Baltimore, Maryland. There is nothing, I don't think there is anything I like better, really, than a Wednesday Wisdom, Wellness, and Wealth event. I hope that you have enjoyed your time, that you've learned a lot, that you will slow down and breathe. Thank you for being here. Thank you to Ikrama Mohammed, and thank you all, and we'll see you next time here at the Pieces Collective.